Okay, so the first Rugby League Ashes test at Wembley is just finished between England and Australia. It's finished 26 points to 6 to Australia. It was only 8-0 at half time, however. So the first half was a lot closer than I think the final scoreline actually suggests. England had opportunities. They looked more dangerous running on last play than kicking on last play. I think having Herbie Farnworth in the right centre position was a very interesting tactical setup, considering most of the time for the Dolphins and also before that with the Broncos in the NRL, he is more of a left centre, and I think that actually helped Dom Young a little bit. Dom Young, in recent seasons in the NRL, has been exposed defensively. That is a weakness in his game is defensively, and it's normally to do with the combination he has with the centre inside him. And I think that was a tactical switch by Sean Wayne to put Herbie Farnworth on the right hand side alongside Dom Young, and they actually had some fair opportunities. They had a fair battle with their opposite numbers, as did the England left, and both in the wide channels, with Johnston on the left wing and Dom Young on the right wing. England had opportunities. Now Reece Walsh has managed to get in the passing lanes for those opportunities and disrupt potential overlaps. Now England had those opportunities. They were exposing Australia in those wide areas, even off the back foot, because England weren't winning the front foot contest. Australia were winning the arm wrestle. Now, it did take 22 minutes for Australia to get their opening try through Reece Walsh, and Reece Walsh has had a fantastic game, especially in the second half. He's torn England to pieces, and there's other reasons why England fell apart in the second half. But Reece Walsh has had a very good game defensively. He's also had a very good game in attack. He does score his first try in 22 minutes. And I think that was a fair reflection on the game. I think Reece Walsh getting that try, great support play as well. That's something he's very, very good at, is that support play where he comes in from the fullback position and is either in a wing position or a centre position, sort of when the other outside back, be it a wing or a centre, has the ball. He pops up in that support play position, which then creates a defensive overload where the defence can't deal with it because they've got too many ball runners to deal with. Now, yes, in the build-up to his first try, you could argue, was Mickey Lewis taken out by Hudson Young? Was there some obstruction there? They did look at that. The try's ultimately given, and there were, I don't think the fans in the stadium were necessarily at Wembley weren't necessarily happy with that decision. But England had been shot all to pieces defensively on their left edge. There was so much space, and any number of Australian players could have scored that try. Not just Reece Walsh. Any number of players could have gone over to open the scoring. But that also, I think Australia had won the arm wrestle at that point. They had won the territory. They were gaining more metres on their sets. Their kick chase was better. Their end of sets was better. England's end of sets were hit and miss. They looked better when they were running the ball on play 5 rather than kicking the ball on play 5. They had shown some threats down in those wide areas. Now, the Angus Crichton disallowed try, I don't know how that even had to go to a review. I think Dom Young, he does have his weaknesses occasionally under the high ball defensively. I think Dom Young's actually had a pretty decent game today, to be fair. I think working with Herbie Farnworth as his centre on his inside, I think has definitely given Dom Young a little bit of confidence. That disallowed try for Angus Crichton, I think that is the right decision. I think Josh Alokara has made no attempt to try and challenge fairly for the ball, and he's taken Dom Young out. The fact it went to a review and the length of time it took to review that, the touch judge is there, the referee's there. That annoys me with the officiating in rugby league a little bit. Sometimes we do lose that kind of flow of a game when decisions like that take far too long to get correct. When it's quite easy and obvious he was taken out in the air, let's just give the penalty and move on. But at that point, England were creaking at that point. Now, at the end of the first half, Nathan Cleary slotted a penalty to make it 8-0, so more than a converted try. But England are still in the game. England are still in the game. And that is vitally important, as they weren't out of the game at this point. However, how England started the second half, they did not start the second half particularly well. They obviously are on the kick reception from the Australian kickoff. They do have a very good opening set. They do get to their kick. They do make some decent metres up the field. The kick chase, however, non-existent and was poor. And then Reece Walsh nearly scores an individual try from his own 10-metre area because the kick chase is so disorganised and is lacking intensity as well. It's not just like there's a disorganised kick chase, it's a very unintense kick chase where it's all over the place. Players are just ambling up in the kick chase. There's no intensity behind it. And Reece Walsh just goes down the other end of the field. And is allowed a good long run with the ball. And yes, there is some good scramble defence. Dom Young and Herbie Farnworth do quite well on the scramble defence. But that is the problem. That initial kick chase summed up England's second half. Now Angus Crichton does get his try eventually, his first try in 45 minutes, as a result of, on the back of, that lengthy run by Reece Walsh. The momentum swing that caused. Ultimately, Australia, camped down England's end. Angus Crichton gets his first try. As I say, in 45 minutes. That's really good support play. Angus Crichton is renowned for this with the Sydney Roosters. He's a great support player when in possession. And he richly deserved his first try. And he could have had a hat-trick. Yes, he could have actually had a hat-trick today. But he deserved that try. And again, it's the defensive mismatches, it's the momentum swing, and it's also that accuracy on play 5, which England did lack at times. It is the accuracy. Now, England would still sort of stick in there for a bit, but again, kick chases. I mean, the last play on sets was not always great. They also looked like they were very, very tired. They tired very, very early on in the second half, which was a concern about the fitness of the squad a little bit. Some of the NRL players in the squad have had a good layoff, so it's that match fitness. But even some of the Super League players haven't necessarily played for a good month or so. There was some match fitness concerns and some overall fitness concerns because they looked tired after about 50-55 minutes. And yes, Australia are dominating that possession and territory kind of things, and they're more accurate, and Australia were vastly more accurate. And then it ultimately leads to Angus Crichton getting his second try, and it's just so easy. They're falling off tackles. They're falling off tackles at that point in the game. And yes, you can argue that the way the game has evolved since 2020, the fatigue factor has been brought back in a way that it wasn't pre-2020. That fatigue factor and the speed of the game has sped up, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But when you've got that imbalance where one side looks significantly fitter than the other, and with match fitness and overall fitness, and that is a concern. Now Angus Crichton scored, his second try on 65 minutes. Reece Walsh, though, would get his second try 71 minutes, and that capped off a brilliant performance by Australia. It was a very, very good, solid team performance. They were more accurate, and for a first test in a 3-test series where there has been that layoff for players, apart from, let's say, those players who played in both the Super League and NRL Grand Finals not that long ago, 2-3 weeks ago, a lot of these other players have had a month to 6 weeks, sometimes 7 weeks of not playing. And you would think, a little bit of match fitness. Some of them might be fatigued a little bit. Use the interchange bench. I think Australia used their interchange a lot better. I think while England stuck in the game in the first half. I mean, and Daryl Clark getting the consolation try right at the end, where England finally got some sustained possession in the Australia 10-metre, 20-metre area. They finally applied some pressure, got a little momentum swing, but that accuracy was lacking in the first half, where they were rushing the play a little bit. They were obviously anxious to try and obviously get some points against Australia. They weren't patient enough. They were rushing things a little bit. When they finally had a little bit of patience, and they were a little bit more accurate by just taking that little extra half second or second to make a decision and get into the right area, you get results. And yes, there was a penalty from the set before where, players taken out, chasing through on a kick. They get the penalty and they just keep working with that pressure a little bit. It obviously was too little too late. That's that Daryl Clark tries how they should have played in that first 20 minutes a little bit. Just the field position and that territory and that just sometimes being a little bit more structured in your set. Get to your kick or get to your final play, and don't force the play. And I think they did force the play a little bit in the first half, but that second half, from that opening kick chase at the end of the first set, they lost their way, they lost their focus, and then the fitness was a concern. And Australia just looked more settled, more comfortable with the combinations, and they just looked more in tune as a team. They also, you could argue, they've had that extra week of preparation, considering that the NRL Grand Final was a week earlier than the Super League Grand Final. I think that could have had a part to play a little bit on the match fitness. But overall, Australia more accurate. They've got some more settled combinations. Yes, they've got debutants in their squad, but a lot of this squad have played last year in the Pacific Championships and the year before, so they've got some good international combinations and state of origin combinations. This England side, again, debutants. You've got those NRL players that have obviously been brought into the squad. You've got those Super League players that are also in the squad, and the NRL is a different style of play. It's a different style of play. It's a different speed of play. There's more emphasis put on a faster play the ball, and trying to keep that intensity and speed of play quicker. Super League, there's a different style of play, a different style of halfback play, and I think that could potentially, going forward, it could be interesting to see how England respond for the second test. Now, injuries coming out the game. Only one injury to report, and that is Isaiah Yeo, the Australia captain. He went off with an HIA after just 9 minutes of play. He did not pass that HIA. He was ruled out with I believe it was a Category 2 concussion, but he did fail the head injury assessment. So that means he will miss next week's second test in Liverpool at the Bramley Dock Stadium, which is Everton's new stadium. He's now out. So that does pose a little bit of a headache, potentially, for Kevin Walters, the Kangaroos head coach. But overall, I think Australia can be very, very happy with a very solid opening first test. I think there's still room for improvement with this Australia side. I think England, they can look at that last 5-10 minutes and go, okay, Daryl Clark's try, that's the type of end of set we want, and that that more accuracy we want. They were rushing the play a little bit, and forcing the play in that first half, but they showed when they can get in those wide areas, they can stretch that Australian defence, because Australia liked for some reason to defend a little bit narrow. They did have some real good success in those wide channels down both the right and the left, more so down the left than the right, and so that could be an area where they continue to work on as a potential attacking threat. But they need to work on their kick chase, they need to work on their end of sets, and they also need to work just on just basic accuracy, because they were forcing the play. There were a lot more handling errors from England than Australia. On the defensive side of things, again, getting those numbering up correctly, Australia just looked more settled as a side. But there we go, Australia 26, England 6. It wasn't as close as I thought it would be for a first test in a 3-test series. Australia definitely looked more settled and better prepared. And there's been a lot of, as I say, Sean Wayne's faced a lot of criticism from fans on social media about squad selections, why Jake Connor's been left out, for example, and other players being left out, why certain players have been named in the squad. And he has faced some criticism, and at full time, comes down from the coach's box. He stood on the sideline. You could see when the camera panned to him, that was not a good look. He looked like a defeated, he looked defeated. So we will see what England respond in the second and third test, and also what lineup changes Australia might make, because you've got Isaiah who's out with a concussion. How that impacts the interchange and the forward pack, and also will he rotate the squad a little bit, or will Kevin Walters stick with the team that's just put 20 plus points on England? Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts on the game in the comments section below. I'll have some more content for you all very, very soon.